about, Brad? That I wasn't stuck in the trenches of World War I with you.
Huh?
That I wasn't stuck in the trenches of World War I.
But what? I don't get...
Who would want to be stuck in the trenches with you?
I probably would have died really quick, so you wouldn't have suffered that long. And honestly, you could have just left me and walked away, so it's not like I could keep up with you, so I don't get... Doesn't really... The logic doesn't fit.
I could just see it now. Everybody's being quiet and Brad, oh, my back is spasming. Shut the fuck up, insurance. I need some ice cream because the dairy settles my stomach. Would you shut up? The sniper's right there.
I can't follow the logic for the punchline because they wouldn't let someone like me into the army. So I wouldn't even make it that far.
This is I Love Lucy rules, like where people who shouldn't be there are there anyway.
Oh, this is like what if comedy?
Yeah.
What if there was a paperwork malfunction and
oh man,
I ended up in there?
I wish my life was what if comedy instead of literal comedy, where I'm looking at you and go, this is it. I have to find humor in this, or we all die miserable.
Every day is what if for me.
What if I get up and do something? What if I...
Yeah.
Like that?
What if I wasn't in so much pain? What would that be like? What if I didn't suffer so much? What if I wasn't 30 pounds overweight? What if I had a girlfriend? What if I had less hair on my body?
See, that was you yes-anding me. You yes-anded me all the way into what if I had less hair on my body? Not what you were doing the other day where you're just like, it's not funny.
Okay. But I was picking apart your...
You were yes-knowing me the other day.
Well, I sort of was doing that. But, yeah. Okay.
No, you were actually doing that, not sort of.
I was nitpicking your logic.
Comedy is not logic, man. Comedy is suffering.
Sometimes it is.
Comedy is suffering.
Right. So,
yeah.
So I'm just a boatload of comedy.
That's how you bring joy into everybody's lives.
Comedy in the hairy flesh. The balding Ewok.
Just the contradictory terms. Comedy and the hairy flesh. The balding Ewok.
I am a walking contradiction. We know this. Our audience should know this. The 3 people that listen. Numbers get less every time I say it.
I know. And the thing is, our numbers are growing. But you keep... The better it gets for us, the worse you have to make yourself feel about it because you can't handle the truth.
You can't handle the truth. Yeah. Okay.
You look like you're going on a safari. You have your khaki shirt, your green military colored tank top thing,
yeah,
and your safari shorts. You look like the crocodile hunter. Crikey.
Do I have to every time, when I'm getting clothed, do I have to think about how you might make fun of me? Because I don't want to live in that world where every choice I make, it's, look at when you picked the wrong pants, you picked the wrong shirt.
I didn't say.
And what are you doing?
I didn't say you're wearing the wrong thing.
We're on the radio. There's no one can see me, so I wasn't worried about it.
Dude,
now I gotta worry.
Do you realize you just said radio as if anyone even knows what that is anymore?
Radio waves. They fly through the air and kill bees.
I'm not saying there's anything wrong with you. I'm just saying that's what you look like right now.
Well, not radio waves, but microwave radiation.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Edison. I'm talking to you about...
Okay.
I'm not saying there's anything wrong with it. Not that there's anything wrong with that.
I'm on a safari, apparently.
Yeah, you just need a pith helmet.
Oh, whatever.
Do you know what a pith helmet is?
I'm imagining the safari thing.
The round thing with the...
Yeah, it's beige.
Yeah.
And it's like, it looks like a bowl, but on your head.
Yeah, instead you're wearing an FSU hat.
Yeah, well, just the colors match. Even when I'm relaxed, I like to match. Is that okay?
It's so funny to me that you don't care about so many things, but you still... There's like some rules you won't break for yourself. Yeah. I want to match no matter what.
It's part of my contradictory nature because my body is so... I feel like if I'm going to put... the clothes shouldn't make it worse.
Yeah, you'd think at this point you'd be used to not giving a shit what people think about you.
Yeah, just... If I'm going to cover my gross body, I should put some effort into it. Like maybe it nullifies some of the...
It'll balance itself out.
Yeah.
Well, you need to be wearing a fucking tuxedo then. Because this isn't really doing it for me.
I would actually look like a penguin. Because I'm that size.
Could this just be the show?
It's possible. I mean...
Oh, man. We only need like 30 more minutes of this and we can... Yeah.
We're about to talk about well, I don't want to say boring documentary, but... I mean, yeah, it's not like explosions and flashes and...
There were actually explosions
people.
And flashes and attractive people. So we saw... Actually, this, I think, is our first actual review of a documentary.
We did Mr. Rogers.
We briefly discussed it, but we didn't really... Did we? I know. Yeah, you're right. We did a whole thing on it.
It was half a show.
So we very rarely make it out to see documentaries. I watch a lot on Netflix or whatever sometimes, but we saw They Shall Not Grow Old, the new Peter Jackson directed documentary.
It was in 3D, which is... Never seen a documentary in 3D.
Which is basically the 100-year anniversary of the ending of World War I. It was in... So they went through... Just the basic info about this thing is they went in and they restored... I don't think they restored 100 hours of footage, but they had 100 hours of footage.
Yeah.
And then they went in and watched footage and figured out what story they were going to tell. And they restored, a significant portion of this film footage, that 100-year-old film footage. I
think he said they got it down to like 6 hours of video.
Yeah.
The initial rough. So they probably cleaned that much up, but then put most of the effort into the hour and a half edit. And
they went through something like 600 hours of audio files of interviews from over the years, and they cut it into what it was like in the trenches of World War I for the British soldiers. So first of all, the trailer to this documentary made me want to see it.
Me too.
I might have seen it based on it was a documentary directed by Peter Jackson. That might have been all you had to tell me.
Or just Peter Jackson, yeah.
Yeah, Peter Jackson. But the documentary, the trailer, when they show you the black and white footage and then they show it colorizing and it comes to life in such a vivid way. I am glad. Well, first of all, we'll talk about that later. But it just comes to life, and you hear the voices, and you see the sound effects and the footsteps and everything. They went through a massive effort to restore the footage here. All the way down to having forensic lip readers who can look at the footage and get with some apparently serious accuracy what the people were saying, to I'm sure some degree of error, but they have forensic lip readers go in and say, oh, he's saying this, and then they would have voice actors record the lines so that you could have, because back then in the early 1900s, they did not have the ability to record sound and sync it to film.
Right. And they didn't even have. I mean, they had to hand crank it.
They were hand cranking the film camera, so it wasn't even a consistent frame rate. It was like operated by a human.
It's got to be. I mean, as far as documentaries go, it's got to be worst case scenario.
Yeah,
it had to be every problem that's ever.
Yeah,
you have to. It had to have been every problem that anyone's ever had on documentaries. It was this and more because. Yeah. I mean, everything from film being too old, overexposed, not exposed enough, no audio.
100-year-old archived footage. And they brought it to life.
Frame by frame. I mean, you know, I'm someone who does Photoshop a couple times a week because of our shows. I know what work goes into. In fact, most of the time I was missing dialogue and what people are saying because I'm watching how they cut everyone out because it was in 3D, so I'm looking at the layers like the foreground and middle ground, and so I'm just looking at all the effort like frame by frame. You're thinking 30 frames per second after. I'm just like, oh my god, all that cutting and
in terms of a documentary or archive footage, it is brought to life in a way that I've never seen before. I'm sure that I know that they've colorized footage and all that stuff, but it's not really that. It's just the way they brought the attention to detail that they took to try to put you in there with them, you know?
They had to try to make an interesting story out of
100 hours of archive footage.
Right, and it's not even footage of the actual war.
Yeah.
Because I have to tell you, I felt like the first 20 minutes was just marching. Just different shots of people marching. And I was starting to lose my mind. And then right at that point, then it transitioned into the 3D and the color. I was like, oh my god, thank you. And the sound came in.
And that's another thing. I never thought I'd go see a documentary in 3D.
Yeah, I never thought I'd see that many people in the theater to watch a documentary.
Yeah, the theater we were in was at least half to three-quarters full. There to watch a documentary, and I'd hate to think it was because they thought, well, it's in color. I can go sit through a documentary that's in color.
Well, 3D glasses. This will be interesting.
And the only reason we saw it in 3D was because they only had one 2D showing for the day, and we missed that one, so we went to the 3D. Yeah. And however,
I have to say,
I was happy. Yeah, I was glad to see it that way. I don't love 3D movies. I avoid them. They pull me out of the story more than immerse me into it. But this was interesting to see this way.
Yeah. In fact, I would go so far as to say if it's at all possible, if you're going to see this, see it in 3D because it helps. Because it points, I mean, honestly, there are explosions, but there's really not a story like in a typical war because they didn't have footage of actual war stuff. The cameramen weren't thinking about shooting or filming whenever actual, people were getting shot and all that.
Yeah.
So we really just got kind of before and after most of the footage.
They were trying to stay alive, really.
Yeah.
It's not safe to send These days, cameramen will go into battle zones. But back then, guy running around with the camera, hand cranking it. He's a sitting duck.
Yeah.
So the documentary it starts out with everyday life in England. And then they're like, oh, well, we're going to go to war with Germany. And they go through this whole thing about how people just started signing up to go. They volunteered. It was a volunteer army. And
it was funny how they talked about tricking people into volunteering. Like, I didn't hear the whole link, but he talked about marching in through the town and tricking people into marching with them, and they would march them right into the office to go to the what do you call it? Sign up for the war.
That's the thing. That's the thing about one of the things about this film is that it is funnier than you think it's going to be. part of it is the language barrier. Not that there's a language barrier between Englishmen and Americans, but the accents and the way they talk is just so proper. And when they make a joke, it's like, ha, old chap. And then it's like, it's funny.
Like, yeah, someone says Bob's your uncle, and you're like, what?
Bob's your uncle? I thought that was something only Austin Powers said. That's like a real thing. But you just get a sense of, at the very beginning, you get a sense of people signing up to go fight the good fight, and it was patriotic, and there was a lot of things in the first half of the movie where they're just talking about you just did what you had to do back in those days. And they talked about there were guys that little details that you never really think about back in 1915 or whatever when they went to the war,
like sleeping, or just like the everyday of nothing's really going on, but you need to you need to find a place to sleep, you need to eat, and you need to entertain yourself.
Yeah, and the fact that they just had one uniform. I wore the same thing for 4 years. The guy said the same thing. I had the same uniform.
They only had one change of clothes.
Yeah,
but I found it real interesting how they talked about where most of the war, it's not like, I'm guessing 90%, was just them waiting.
Yeah, waiting to die.
Yeah, and it was also interesting how, like, a lot of it, like, people, they were... And it wasn't just waiting for the next battle. It's like they were always in danger because they said, like, every day, like, if they would cook something and smoke would rise out of the trenches, then next thing you know, a bomb would be flying over there. So, like, at any moment, even when they're relaxing or whatever, all day, it's just you could die at any moment. And it was kind of weird.
Yeah.
I never thought about it like that, whereas... If you imagine that every day, you or someone could be dead.
Gone, yeah. 1 million British soldiers died in World War I. 1 million.
Yeah.
1 million. Think about it. 1 million people died from that war. And so it basically told the story of... Now, my grandparents, our grandparents were World War II veterans. So... I know more of the World War II history just because my grandfather was a bomber pilot in World War II. So as a little kid, I was like really excited to know about that. But I never really went much farther back than that. So this was
World War I, right?
This was World War I. So it's a great history lesson. Just listen to these guys talk and to hear them talk about how that was just what you did back then. You just did it. You did it because it was the right thing to do, and it was patriotic. And there were 16-year-old kids signing up for to go into the military to go fight because they wanted to go be a part of doing the right thing. Yeah. It was patriotic and all that stuff. And it just makes you think about today. We do have a volunteer army in our country. However, it's so much the attitude towards, like, if we had something like that come up, it wouldn't have. I can't see any of my students going, I got to go fight the Nazis, or the Germans, I got to go, because they would be too worried about what they were going to miss on Snapchat. Even I wouldn't drop everything and go sign up for the thing, because back when September 11th happened, you remember when that was, on September 11th?
Yeah.
Yeah. We did have people go join the military. I know people who went to join the military after that.
I honestly, if I had a normal body, I was actually considering... I felt the anger back when that happened. I was on the bandwagon of let's go kill those guys, even though I didn't know who it was. I was like, yeah. So
that part it just made me realize how much the world has changed in 100 years. And then they go to war. Then they go into these battles, and you realize just how shitty it was for them.
Oh yeah,
they were literally living in the mud.
They said a piece of bread, maybe some butter, and one slice of bacon. That was every day.
Yeah.
a slice of a little more than a slice of bread. I think they had a hand.
He said it was like one loaf of bread for like 12 different guys. So yeah. But if you think about it, that war was fought on the ground. They dug these trenches. And they lived in there. They lived in there for months at a time.
It was interesting seeing how they had to dig, what do you call it? Little, not caves, but little sleeping areas inside the trenches.
So they have a place to lay down.
Yeah.
Near the end of the documentary, I think you had stepped out for a second. Yeah. One of the guys said, when I got home from the war, that first night I laid down in my bed. And it was the first time I'd laid in a bed since I'd left 4 years earlier. He had been sleeping in the dirt. The disgusting mud with dead bodies, rats, just all over him. And that would never happen these days because the technology has developed in such a way that they can tents. They can do all sorts of stuff and we don't have to go be face to face with these guys anymore, with like our enemy, whoever it is anymore. We can just go in and dive bomb them and take out a whole, whatever of them. But they were having to hand combat one German at a time, and it's kind of like the difference between analog and digital. Like the youth of today knows like cell phones and stuff like that, but you hand them a rotary phone and they don't know what the fuck to do with that thing. Like dial the numbers, like turn the numbers. That's what World War I was compared to World War II even. And then if you think about it now, like a battle these days is almost like a video game. They wouldn't even
drones.
They're sitting there going, you don't even go fight them face to face. And those guys, I have an impression that those guys would be like, that's not even fair to what you're doing to each other. That's not like a proper battle. You're just blowing people up from the sky.
Yeah,
hundreds at a time.
More innocents get killed, I believe, nowadays than back then.
So it was the story was haunting. It was because you can see the fear on their faces at times when they're just almost like blank stares on their face.
It's strange sometimes to see their face so clearly, and then it's in some cases like see their dead body or see the fatal injury. You definitely should be prepared for. There's a little bit of gore. Because they show you real people.
Dead bodies.
And I think there was even at least once where they showed somebody actually getting killed. Or I remember they were there moving and then something happened and then they were dead. And I was like, I just watched somebody die just now. That was a real person dying.
And there's like leg injuries where you get shot and they get gangrene, and they were showing you the shot.
Trench foot, by the way.
Trench foot, yeah.
It's just from it. The moisture, your foot is in the moisture too long, and your skin absorbs all the water, but then it never dries, so your skin just rots away. From water always being wet.
So
just water on your foot.
I feel like it did a really good job of giving you like what Peter Jackson said, a generic idea of what it was like there in the trenches. So the story is told by what we said earlier, like 600 hours of audio interviews that they did with people who actually fought in the war, who were actually there.
Yeah, it's not like we see on Discovery and all that stuff where historians are telling you a story and then there's images that match the story. It's just one person after the other of just telling their perspective. So like one person will say one or two sentences, then someone else will say a sentence, and someone else.
And it strings together the story with those 600 hours of audio interviews.
Well, cut down
into 2 hours or something, and then. But it uses those interviews to stitch together the story, and then they found footage to go along with what they were saying in a way.
By the way, I just have to warn people, And I'm glad you said that you had a problem understanding what they were saying sometimes.
Yeah.
Because I was struggling with my ADD where I was looking at the visuals, breaking down how do they do that, how many layers to make the 3D, So I would constantly lose my place in what people were saying and then have to...
Yeah.
But because there's so many accents and I think there's different volume levels sometimes and some people were soft-spoken, others were loud. So I had a hard time keeping up with what was being said.
The audio is... There are so many different, I guess, English accents from different areas. And that's another thing that they did is they went into their archived footage when they started to re-record the character's voice, like when they did the voiceover and stuff.
Yeah.
They figured out what area that person was. That particular group of people was in this section, and that particular group of people in that section were from this part of England,
like specific dialects.
So they tried to get the right dialects in there, so that it was as accurate as they could have done it 100 years later.
So they saw audio to the footage, so they had to hire actors, silent. Right? So they had to create the audio, sound effects, and all of that.
But yes, when you're listening to it, because you're listening to actual people who fought in the war tell the story, they do stitch together their talking so fast. It's like an unrealistic sentence. It just goes and goes and goes and goes.
It's like a long run-on sentence because I told you that was my biggest problem is I never got a break. It was just constant
what it is sound bites stitched together for 2 hours.
Right.
And while he said, Peter Jackson said, he was just trying to get as much in there as he could. Yeah. However, at times it is overwhelming because as an American who's you're also having to like in your mind translate the thicker accents and stuff. It is hard to follow everything that someone's saying.
And there is a science to like the human brain can only pay attention for a certain amount of time before you start losing the ability to keep focus. As teachers, we learned that we need to have breaks. For every hour, we need a 15-minute break somewhere in there because the constant bombardment of information, your brain is like...
Part of me, like there's a section where there's a big battle right near the end of the war, and it's this big build up to this battle, and the battle scene the music is a little more dramatic, the sound effects, the explosions and everything a little more dramatic, and the people's talking isn't as dramatic as what you're looking at because they're just retelling their story. They're not dramatizing what they're saying at all. So there is a point in time where their story is they're just talking kind of like this, but we're watching battle scene and it feels like, and I thought maybe he did it on purpose where it was harder to follow in that section because he's trying to recreate a chaos of a battle scene where you're like not sure what you're listening to or whatever. However, it is frustrating at times to not be able to hear the whole thing. That did not change how much I loved the documentary, though. I truly loved it from the start. It's I don't want to say it's entertaining because that sounds almost like perverse. It's stimulating.
Yeah, visually stimulating.
Visually, but mentally, I just was instantly put in a position where I'm thinking, God, I mean, what they went through,
Yeah. I want to say, though, I noticed there's been a progression over, I think in the past 20 years even, where documentaries have gotten better and progressed leaps and bounds. Because I remember maybe 15 years ago, I saw, it could even be maybe more like, in the 2000s, maybe even like 18 or 19. There's a documentary called The Kid's All Right. And that was the first time I'd ever seen where they had actually, like, in Photoshop, cut someone out.
You mean the kid stays in the picture?
Stays in the picture?
Yeah, the kid
what did
stays
I
in
say?
the picture.
The
You said the kids are.
Okay.
Yeah, but I know what you're talking about.
That was the first time I'd seen where somebody, instead of just showing a photo, zooming in or out or panning, they would cut a person or maybe the table or whatever, and then put things out of focus, and then have the thing in the foreground, move at a different speed than the background. So
it brought it to life.
As opposed to just a flat picture.
Well, that's technology.
Yeah.
That's technology advancing so that you can do that.
So this is like the next level where they just went all out, and you have depth of field. They just separated everything in each photo. It was, it could be distracting at times, but it is.
It's immersive.
Yes.
Yeah. So I'm gonna say that at the very beginning of the movie, Peter Jackson comes in and gives at least a 5-minute explanation of how the movie came to be.
Yeah.
And
then he tells you
to stay after the credits, and there's literally a 30-minute making of documentary where he explains all the shit they had to go through just to get the movie made.
And I'm gonna be me for a moment in the ADD and say I enjoyed that 30-minute thing at the end a little more than the whole entire documentary because it was, I could follow it.
It also scratched
easier.
your itch, your behind the scenes itch, because as filmmakers, when he said that at the very beginning, I was like, I got excited, even more excited, because I'm like, great, we're going to get to see how they did that.
Yeah.
Because I already was wondering how they did it just from watching the trailers.
And I'm picking apart as we're watching it. I'm seeing how they, frame by frame. I could see the morphing of the pixels. I told you, you could see them shrinking and expanding as it was
stabilizing
from this frame to the next frame. They were blending them together, so you would see how the software was doing its thing. I was that was part of what distracted me was how did they do that? Yeah.
It just turns out that Peter Jackson is like I guess I won't say amateur, but like a civilian historian. His grandfather fought in World War I, and his grandfather was he went back and forth. He went to battle, I think he said, like 3 or 4 times.
Yeah.
And when the war was over, his grandfather was so physically and psychologically damaged that he could barely function by the time he was in his 30s.
I think he died in his 50s.
Yeah.
And at that point, the son, which is Peter Jackson's father, had to carry him everywhere because he couldn't walk anymore.
So as a kid, he saw his grandfather not doing well and knew that it was because of injuries suffered in the war. He was injured several times.
He even told a story where he was injured badly the first time and
went back.
And after getting fixed up, went back again.
These days, So
can you walk? Yes. Okay.
Peter Jackson grew up with a sense of curiosity and wonder, I guess, about World War I.
Which is why he was so
perfect.
Right, but also as far as Lord of the Rings and all of that, that's why he was so engrossed. That's why he was the one that needed to do Lord of the Rings and all that, because Lord of the Rings, he could see how Lord of the Rings was all about the war, because he grew up with war and his family in war. So Lord of the Rings, he just knew what it was about. Like, if I didn't have Peter Jackson explain to me how it was birthed from having to, kind of explain war in a way, or, like, war is so traumatic. Those of us who are experiencing any part of it, we need a way to, what do you call it? I don't know, decompress, or just, how do you deal with it? How does your brain work all that out? Well, sometimes we need to tell stories in order to get through it.
I thought was cool is he was perfect for the thing, because as somebody who had studied it since he was a little boy, he had like World War I artillery and weapons, and
he had a
closet full of uniforms. So when they needed to go back and say, well, what color were the British uniforms? He was like, well, we've got one down in the closet. Hallway. There's a scene in the making of where he's like, well, they've got one. We've got that exact uniform down in the closet in the hallway. Let's just go look at it and see what color it is. And it's like, it's almost like you were your whole life preparing for this.
First of all, every time you see him, he looks like he just woke up and got out of bed, which is hilarious.
You know, he has never looked like he's gotten much sleep. Never. His hair's all over the place. And we, as filmmakers, we see that and we appreciate it because we know what that feels like.
Yeah.
But his shirt is wrinkled. He's always wearing shorts. He literally looks like he's $5 away from being homeless. But he's a collector of World War I artillery. And they went off and they didn't use a sound effects library. They actually recorded the sounds live from actual military exercises.
Oh, yeah.
So when you hear like a thing going off, that's an actual sound that they recorded for this movie. So it's fascinating to hear. And you're right, as a filmmaker, that 30-minute making of was just as interesting as the history lesson of the movie itself.
Yeah.
It didn't take away from, for me as a filmmaker, it added to. But my appreciation of the movie. Peter Jackson's minute attention to detail and his actual thoughtfulness on wanting to, he could have very easily just had standard English accents in the voice actors go in and go, crikey.
No one would have known the difference.
And no one would have, not no one, but people wouldn't have cared.
Yeah.
People don't care about stuff like that. But it's his almost like compassion towards these trying to get the story right. He kept saying, if you don't get it right, it's wrong. If you got to get it right.
He said he even went to where the places were himself and took pictures so that they could match the color of the dirt and the grass.
Yeah, he just for 2 or 3 days. He said he went off and he took as many pictures as he could, and it's just his loving care that he took as a director. Not just him, but the whole group of people. But it's his guidance. It's his guidance as a director. His love and care that he took in trying to get it as close to accurate as he could to tell this story. Is endearing, and it makes you realize that he was the best one for this. This was his project from the day he was born, and he just didn't even know yet. I thought it's fascinating. The making of it is fascinating. Yeah. The documentary itself is fascinating. I wanted to see it again right away.
Yeah, and I told you that my one thing, I wish that I want to see it again with subtitles because. That was my biggest thing. Is half the time I wasn't following what was going on. I'm just watching because it's just.
One point in the movie, I got the guy because the theater's crowded. The guy next to me snoring. You complaining about not being able to hear anything, and I can't hear anything because of the two of you guys. I'm trying real hard to pay attention, and I got over here, and I've got you going, I can't hear anything they're saying. I only hear half of what they're saying, and I'm like, well, now I'm hearing none of what they're saying because you're talking to me.
You act like that happened the whole time. There's once I said that to you.
I said at one point.
Okay.
I didn't say the whole time.
I didn't say anything the whole time. Usually we talk more during a movie, but I didn't say anything.
So if you have a chance, go see this documentary.
And we hate 3D normally, but I say see it in 3D.
See it in 3D. It is a unique experience.
Yeah.
It's a unique experience.
And people that make documentaries from now forward are going to be a little upset because, how do you compare to that? A 3D documentary? How... Thanks, Peter.
Well, it's a documentary.
He can't do anything normal.
Oh, Peter Jackson can't just do a simple two people in a room talking movie. He's got to do something that's never been done before.
Yeah.
every time, because that's what fascinates. He likes to be on the edge, just like James Cameron.
I have to be honest. You and I both have that same issue where we can't really work on something unless we're excited about it. There's got to be something that
makes it hard,
sparks our creative. Yeah.
It's almost like the dare element.
Yeah.
I dare you to make this work.
Like, is it something that we haven't seen or done before? Oh, okay, now we're excited. Let's do that.
Yeah. Well, that's just part of being the pursuit of excellence, or trying to tap into something that hasn't,
We just don't want to do the same thing over and over. So I understand,
I thoroughly enjoyed it, even though there at times was a little overwhelmed with what to look at, what to hear.
Yeah, it's the constant flow of information gives you a little bit of fatigue. A little more than halfway through, you start kind of...
It is fatigue. I was noticing. I know that's a good word for it, because you are trying to process everything everyone's saying, and I tell you, they're saying a lot of really profound things about what it's like to be in war, but what it's like to just go do a job and to do it well. That really make you think. Like, you're trying to think about what the guy's saying, but as you're thinking about it, you miss 2 or 3 other things.
Yeah.
And some of the saddest stuff is not even the battles. It's after they come home, where they're talking about they got home and they realized that they couldn't talk to anybody about what went on there, because number one, people either didn't believe them, didn't take it as seriously, or people would argue with them about that's not what really happened, even though they were the people that lived through it. It's not as bad as you're saying it was.
Honestly,
quit complaining. You kids just complain about everything, and it's like, no, I just fought World War One, asshole.
And it's strange that the reality was that the day to day was worse than the actual war part. Like when they were battling, because day to day was the trench foot and the barely being able to eat, and the rats and the dead horses and the dead people and well, as I mentioned earlier, the constant threat of you or someone could die at any moment, and if you do the wrong thing, or like smoke comes up out of the trench because you needed to cook some water because there's no clean water because of all the dead bodies, and then there's smoke there, shoot the bomb, so it's like the day-to-day was worse than the moments you were actually fighting. So that's
it was it's thought-provoking. It really is thought-provoking. I really enjoyed it. I like this sort of stuff, so if you like historical documentaries, it's more
personal. It's a very personal...
In fact, that's something he said. Peter Jackson said, in many ways, this is the most personal film I've ever done.
And you feel it.
You do feel it. And you feel it also when he talks about it at the end, how important it was for him to tell the story, but also to tell it in a way that had never been done before, but also to tell it in a way that got it right, as close as you could get it.
So I want to say too, as we're wrapping up, this is definitely a documentary I recommend. See it in the theater, see it in 3D, because if you don't, most likely you're not going to see it in 3D. I think most of us aren't going to have 3D TVs, and they might not even be as good as what you're going to see in the theater. So I say catch it in the theater if you can.
Yeah, I catch it in the theater, and I never ever recommend 3D either. But if you can, or if it doesn't mess with you, go check it out in 3D.
It shouldn't, because I'm the worst with 3D. 3D always messes with me, but this one was good.
So that's it. They shall not grow old. They shall not grow old.
Yep.
Directed by Peter Jackson and starring,
dead people.
I was thinking at one point in this documentary, I'm thinking, even people who survived, all these people that we're listening to, it's 100 years ago. Nobody in that is alive anymore.
Yeah, I don't think so. It's possible, but probably
not. Because if you think about it, they were 16 or 17 years old in 1915.
Yeah.
That was 100 years ago, so they'd have to be 115 years old. 115, 16, 120 years
Oh,
old.
wow, yeah.
So
probably not.
No, more than I'm just going to say nobody in that thing is alive. It's incredible that that was that long ago. You know what I mean?
Right.
It is a section. It's not just like World War II, because we still have some World War II veterans.
Yeah.
We still have some of the world's greatest generation.
You say it's incredible that it was that long ago, but it's also incredible that it was not that long ago as well.
Yeah.
To think that it's just 100 years ago, and then World War II it's like it feels like it was long, or further back than it actually was. It's hard to believe that so much racism and hate and all of that was so recent. And within a person's lifetime, 100 years.
Yeah. And another thing he said in the in the making of the documentary, he talked about all the footage that he had that they couldn't use. But
they showed you some clips of it, like the ships and
not
stuff.
That was unusable, but there was stuff that just didn't fit into the story he was trying. He only had a couple of hours to tell a story, so he had to leave a lot of the stuff out. Yeah. I really think he should make a whole documentary series. He should go make a part 2 on the land and sea, on the sea part 3 in the air, and then he also talked about women's involvement in the factories and everything during the war, which is something that we had over here too, and in World War II.
Well, he's probably, Peter Jackson is like the king of
trilogies,
DVD extras and all that stuff. So either in iTunes, or if you're a person that still gets Blu-rays, which not very many people do, that it would be an excellent buy, I think. I guarantee you there's going to be there's probably be more extra stuff than there was actual movies.
I'd love to see the same tale told from the other parts of the thing too. The factories, the air, the sea.
Yeah, there's a whole storyline of women, how this is basically the wars helped lead up to the women's liberation movement because there weren't enough people to make the weapons and the vehicles and even to repair them. Yeah. So any woman that would volunteer to operate the equipment. So you got women learning how to build planes and all of that stuff.
Yeah, and then there was like, why can't we vote? We kept you guys alive.
Right.
Basically.
So then that led to women's... So there's a whole story there just in that.
Whole story right there. I'd love to see that documentary. There's so much... There's so much story, so many stories to be told from actual things that happened just from that one thing. It's fascinating. It's fascinating. You could endlessly... It's almost like talking about the Matrix, except this is something that actually happened. You could get deeper and deeper and deeper into how it affected history and how we got into it in the first place. It's crazy. It's crazy. I loved it. I thought it was great.
Yeah, I agree.
That's our that's our conversation / review of They Shall Not Grow Old, directed by Peter Jackson. It's in theaters right now. Go check it out. If you want to contact us, we are movieisms@gmail.com. I am Becca Meyer on Twitter and Instagram. Yeah. He is Balding Ewok and the Crocodile Hunter.
What?
What?
Where's the crocodile come in?
The safari thing.
Oh. That's a callback.
That's a callback, and you ruined it.
I shat all over it.
He shat all over it.
The end.
Movieisms is a production of Super Mega Ultra Entertainment and is produced by Michael Beckemeyer and Bradley Kingston. If you'd like to find out more, follow us on Twitter or Instagram. And make sure you click like on our Facebook page, which is facebook.com/movieisms. If you're enjoying this podcast, please take a moment and give us a 5-star review in iTunes. It only takes a minute, and it helps us out more than you can imagine. Thank you very much, and until next time, we'll see you at the movies.